Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to today's episode of Challenges in the Streets. It's going to be about vehicle stabilization for engine companies. I'm Battalion Chief Mark Davis. Again, pleased to be live here from the Public Safety Training Academy. We're in our high bay today for part of the episode, and then we'll be transitioning outside for the remainder. There will be no break. Folks are simply going to walk outside to handle that part of it. We have 60 minutes scheduled for today's episode, and so hang in there. As always, if you're watching from a firehouse, going to ask you to, in the YouTube chat, to indicate what fire station and the number of folks watching it. If you are a certified chief officer wishing to receive COPDI credit, then I'm going to ask you to fill out the form on the PSTA Quick Link site. You should be familiar with that by now, and Chief Gibson will take care of the credit for that. Try to bring up some current events. We've had a couple big current events here, I'll say, in the last 7 days. Certainly had the fire at the asphalt plant. We're going to wait for some after action to come out on that, and we probably lines itself up to have an episode at least about hazmat-related stuff. We'll see where that goes, trying to gather more intel and info on that. And then Friday and Sunday, just last Friday and yesterday, I guess, we had 2 fires involving our large wood frame 4- and 5-story apartment buildings, donut construction. Sometimes you may talk about that. One on Friday was a fire at the Ava complex, which is in downtown Wheaton, Blue Ridge Avenue. And then yesterday, we had one at the Wheaton Flats, which is basically just down the road. Neither one was huge in terms of the size of the fire, but the complexity of the incident, just the building alone, presents a lot of complexity to that. We've not had many incidents in these finished buildings, so I think we're going to try to talk about those incidents in some way, shape, or form. But from a company officer perspective, I think it's important that you get out there second, third, maybe even fourth to do, first and second do ladder companies. Get to those buildings, identify sprinkler control, how do I access the fire alarm panel, all of that, because in both of those incidents, access to the fire was a little complicated, and controlling of the event was, a challenge there. So get into those buildings, figure it out, especially those couple fire protection features, and we hope to do an episode in the future, probably about those incidents combined. So that's all I got for now. I want to turn it over to Captain Matt Machala. He's going to kind of be the moderator somewhat for today, and he'll take it from here. Captain?
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again today for this episode of Challenge in the Streets. As Chief Davis said, we're at the Public Safety Training Academy here in the high bay, and then eventually we'll be out in the extrication pad, so bear with us if there's a little wind noise or background noise from all our planes flying overhead. Joined by firefighter Jason Eberle from Company 15 on A shift. Jason was nice enough to come back for us a couple of years ago, one of the first episodes of Challenges in the Streets. He did some basic mechanical advantage stuff based on the equipment that we carry, essentially just on the engine companies. And not long after that, I know of at least one instance, I think it was Company 12 on C shift, they actually made a rescue utilizing basic mechanical advantage stuff, utilizing the ladder, I think hose rolls in the engine company to get somebody pinned underneath the vehicle. So this stuff is very pertinent, and it's come up since then. So he's joining us back today for an episode on basic vehicle stabilization, I guess vehicle prep, you should say, based on the equipment and the personnel package that we bring on the engine company. So this stuff is good. Not only you run a collision with one trap, what can the engine company do before the extrication piece gets there, but on any collision you run, whether somebody's confined, trapped, pinned, or even just injured inside the vehicle and the vehicle maybe not in the most stable position, what you can do to help and prep that vehicle and the engine company. So I'm not going to do too much moderation. It's mostly presentation and then demonstration. So I'll turn it over to Firefighter Eberle to begin his presentation.
All right, thank you, Captain. So a quick overview of today's presentation, as the captain alluded to, is basically we're going to do a stabilization overview, some basic vehicle anatomy as far as what are the components on the car and how we typically label them. A little public service announcement, a pet peeve of mine that involves vehicles' electrical systems, specifically with the airbags and the technology evolving today with the airbag systems on vehicles. And then basically a little checklist of what can the engine company do with the equipment that you carry prior to the arrival of an extrication unit to set them up for success and better mitigate the incident. So this goes back to Rescue Tech, and this chart right here is right out of the rescue squad and the truck company driver's manuals. But the basic premise around stabilization is something called the double funnel principle. And as you can see here to the diagram on the left, basically it's two funnels inverted on top of each other. The top of the funnel would act as the top of the step chalk or the piece of cribbing where we're collecting the load or the vehicle. And then we want to transfer that load down through our stabilization or the step chalk and distribute that load to a wider footprint or the ground. And you can correlate the double funnel principle to the framing in any single-family house that we're common with running as a fire department. Typically, the top plate on the top of your stud wall, that would be the top of your funnel where you collect the load of the roof or the floor above. We then transfer that load directly down through our studs or the vertical framing members. And then we distribute that load through the sole plate to the foundation of the house so you can effectively transfer load from top to bottom. So that's what's known as the double funnel principle. So why do we stabilize, or what does that accomplish for us? Specifically with an engine company typically arriving first on scene with a transport unit, our number one goal is to protect the patient. We want to protect the car from moving, from shifting, from crushing, things like that, so we can protect the patient to be able to administer care to the patient. It also protects us as emergency responders. Typically, these car accidents, we find them in precarious situations. The vehicles are shifted, they may continue to roll or shift. So anything we can do to prevent that will allow us to safely operate around the vehicle and remove the patients and care for them in a safe manner. Obviously, we already went over limit and decreasing shifting and movement of the car. The primary means for stabilization is we want to remove the suspension from the vehicle, the bounciness of it, transfer that to our cribbing or our step chalks to distribute that to the ground. In doing all of this, sets up the extrication unit if needed prior to their arrival. And one of the big things the extrication units do with stabilization is something called it maximizes or increases their tool efficiency. So when they place a hydraulic tool against the car, if the car is moving back and forth, it's not going to be as efficient. Versus if the car is properly stabilized and distributed the weight of the vehicle to the ground, that tool is going to operate more efficiently and cut or spread better. So the basic two things on the engine company that you carry for stabilization are step chalks and wheel chalks, okay? We can do a lot with those. So the big thing that always comes up, is it okay to invert a step chalk, or do we have to use it upright? And the answer to that is it's okay to invert it, and a lot of times it's easier. So as you can see, the picture on the left with an inverted step chalk, each point of the step is making contact with the ground. So when we collect that load on the top and distribute it through the step chalk, it will distribute it to the ground. As you see, the picture on the right there, the step chalk is worn, it's probably old, it's beat up. The points on the steps are no longer making contact with the ground. So essentially, when you go to load the step chalk, it's going to act like a beam or a bridge, and it's going to want to bend and can possibly break. So the one thing to note is if you're going to invert the step chalk, part of your daily checkout should be to check that when you flip it over, that all the points are touching the ground. And they're made of wood usually, so it's easy to replace them if they're not. Now the newer engine companies, they have the big plastic step chalks on them, so those should always be touching the ground. They're not going to wear down as much. So when I say inverting the step chalk is usually easier, it'll be easier to demonstrate this concept when we go outside. But the proper way to actually use a step chalk in the upright configuration, as you see here, is you want to find the step that is as closest to the vehicle rocker panel as possible. And there's actually going to be a small gap. So the step chalk itself will not be touching the vehicle when you place it underneath in an upright fashion. When you go to let the air out of the tires, the vehicle will then make contact with the step of the step chalk and properly load it. So a lot of times this can be difficult to accomplish because the steps aren't at the right height for you. The vehicle's on terrain that's uneven. The 4 step chalks you're going to place around the vehicle are at different heights. So when you go to let the air out of the tires, one of the steps is not loaded and can easily pull the step chalk out. So that's why I say a lot of times it's easier to invert the step chalk because you have that solid surface on the top that's sloping to load versus having to try to individually load one of the steps. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll demonstrate that when we go outside.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, obviously throw them in the chat. We are monitoring it, and we'll try to get answers for you as we go along.
This is just a little overview of basic vehicle anatomy in case you're on scene and the officer or the guys that are on the extrication unit start using some of this terminology. We typically label the posts, which are the upright dividers that are usually between the doors, starting at the front of the car, working to the rear. So as you can see here, the part in red, blue, green, and orange would be A post at the front, followed by the B post at the back of the front door, followed by the C post at the back of the rear passenger door, and then the D post at the trunk of the car. So from front of the car to the back of the car in alphabetical order. If you run a school bus, you can go all the way to letter Z, I suppose. But typically, you're going to have A, B, C, or D. The part of the car at the roof where the posts intersect, that would be in brown. We typically label that as your roof rail. And then the part at the bottom of the car where the posts intersect at the bottom, that's the light blue. We call that the rocker panel. So the main components that you should be familiar with are your posts and how they're labeled from front to back, the roof rail, and the rocker panel.
I had a question real quick. Can you go
Yeah.
back one? So we talk about placing the step chalks. I know we're going to kind of show it out there. Is there any like specific considerations? And you'll probably talk about it out there. Just the rocker panel terminology kind of made me think of it. But if you're placing around any of these parts of the vehicle, I know you're going to show us out there, but there's certain things you want to consider, like to look at, like a certain kind of rocker panel that you might not want to like place a step chalk under where it's not quite as stable, and how far to get it under and stuff like that, or is it just vehicle dependent?
Okay, very good question. Something that's not in the slideshow that I probably should have put in and mentioned is there's 2 basic vehicle construction types. You have full frame and unibody. Full frame rescuers and first responders need to be very cognizant of, and that is the vehicle's electrical systems. With responders need to be very cognizant of, and that is the vehicle's electrical systems. With the hybrid vehicles coming cognizant of, and that is the vehicle's electrical systems. With the hybrid vehicles coming out, they're ever evolving, and that is the vehicle's electrical systems. With the hybrid vehicles coming out, they're ever evolving, they're ever changing electrical systems. With the hybrid vehicles coming out, they're ever evolving, they're ever changing. With the hybrid vehicles coming out, they're ever evolving, they're ever changing. But basically we have hybrid vehicles coming out, they're ever evolving, they're ever changing. But basically we have they're ever evolving, they're ever changing. But basically we have the 12-volt battery system, they're ever changing. But basically we have the 12-volt battery system. But basically we have the 12-volt battery system. Basically we have the 12-volt battery system. And have the 12-volt battery system. And then the 12-volt battery system. And then they control the 12-volt battery system. And then they control things that we're concerned about in vehicle accidents are the airbags. Airbags have things called capacitors. Capacitors are essentially little batteries that store energy for the airbag system. So if the vehicle is involved in a crash and the 12-volt battery system is damaged, the capacitors store enough energy to still activate the airbags. There's two main types of airbags we're seeing in vehicles now. There's dual charge airbags, and then there's dual inflator module airbags. And basically what these both are is safety systems built into cars that once the airbag is already fired once, it either has a secondary charge or another airbag built into that charge that can fire again up to 20 or 30 minutes after the accident is over in case there's a secondary impact. So that's where my kind of public service announcement comes in as first responders is just because we arrive on scene and disconnect battery power, always consider the airbags live and they could always fire. So keep your head away from the front steering wheel, keep your head away from the dashboard when we're reaching into the car. And then the last slide is basically a checklist here of what the engine company can do arriving on scene of an extrication or a vehicle accident. One of the big things we can do as soon as we get there is ensure that the vehicle's in park, make sure that the vehicle engine is turned off, and we can also set the parking brake. Those three things right there will mitigate 90% of any issues we will ever be involved in. If the extrication unit's still coming, some things you can do is we can disconnect the 12-volt battery supply if you have access to it. We can deploy our step chocks and wheel chocks for stabilization. And then obviously we always want to place a hand line in service if the extrication unit's on its way and there's somebody trapped or pinned.
Yeah, I mean, you got something else, all right? Because I think it's a good time just to mention that there's so many competing priorities, right? When we get somewhere on an accident, obviously we want to cover everything in our vehicle accident appendix C, the IRP, you know, provide a safe work area by positioning for blocking. If we get somewhere and hopefully we have 4 people on the engine, you know, maybe the transport unit's behind. I ride a rescue engine, but in a more rural area where you might be by yourself for a few minutes. So you have a wreck with one trapped. You know, we're trying to place a hand line in service. The officers may be doing a circle check, kind of quick triage. How many patients do we have? You know, what's going on? Where are they trapped, pinned, confined? Paramedics may be providing patient care. Then that leaves basically your driver who's starting to get equipment out or whatever else. But you know, don't overlook this stuff. It's, you know, as the incident evolves, you can you know, start picking these things off in order of priority. And speaking of stabilization, the wheel chocks are a big thing that, I mean, I try to do, but I've seen it overlooked plenty of times on auto fires, right? Like, potentially incredibly unstable environment,
Yeah.
you know, with electronic parking brakes and stuff like that. Did the person put it in park? Did they not? Throwing a wheel chock down an auto fire, that's a form of stabilization, right? And
Yeah,
something
absolutely.
pretty easy as an officer or whatever you can do. The big metal wheel chocks, you got one for the fire truck, got one for the car. Doesn't hurt even a situation like that to do a minimal amount of stabilization and potentially prevent something bad from happening. So
Absolutely.
good stuff. You ready to go outside?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, cool. Let's we're gonna transition, guys. We'll go out on the extrication pad here and show you guys some static demos and different stabilization techniques we can use depending on how your vehicles are set up. So let's head outside.
give me a countdown again. All right, welcome back. So outside, we're going to go through 4 different basic stabilization scenarios, 4 different configurations you might define the vehicles in, and just show you some of the ways you can stabilize them with the equipment carried on the engine company. So first up is your bread and butter vehicle on 4s. And throughout these, we're only going to do one side of the vehicle. So just assume you would do the same exact process to the other side of the vehicle. So with the vehicle on all 4s, we'll just go over the basic vehicle anatomy again. Here you have your A post, your B post, your C post. This would be your roof rail.
Guys, just bear with us. We'll resume in a minute. These are the hazards of live TV here. We're having some visual technical difficulties apparently, so just bear with us for another second. We'll get the video feedback up for you. Thank you.
Somebody says they can't see the video.
Oh, here it is. So that's him right there. I don't know if it's gonna play because oh yeah, that's Danny right there, and he helped me do. This was in 23. I think that's like the last time I did it. So see, I couldn't get over. And then
Did I turn it off maybe?
no, it's really kicked up, and like I'm like,
I trust me.
I did it.
I know exactly.
I was
And that false grip
struggling.
is weird because it hurts my wrists.
Yeah.
Especially this wrist.
But I can do. I've done 10 bar muscle ups in a row if I'm fresh. You know, like bar muscle ups, I have no problem. No problem. I think it's the stability, and my arms kind of kick out, and I can't do it.
All right, thanks for bearing with us, guys. I think we're back, so we'll take a couple seconds here just to make sure we have good audio and video. I'm not seeing anybody waving, so I think we're good. All right, go, Jason. Thanks.
Just start over where we left off. So outside, we're going to go over the 4 basic vehicle configurations that you'll find in your typical accidents, and we'll stabilize them with the equipment carried on the engine companies. So first, we're going to start out with a vehicle on all 4s. So your typical bread and butter accident. So as we alluded to inside, utilizing step chocks, the 2 places we're going to want to stabilize or insert the step chocks is right here where your A post meets your rocker panel. And then back here where your C post, again, meets your rocker panel. And then for all purposes out today, just assume we would do the same exact process on the other side of the car. We're only going to be showing you one side of the car. And then after this, you would let the air out of the tires. That would load both of your step chocks, utilizing your double funnel principle, and your vehicle will be secure to operate around. You notice in this orientation, I inverted the step chocks. I find it easier a lot of times to do that. So let's go over the proper way to use step chocks if you use them in the upright configuration, which sometimes can be harder. So to use a step chalk in this orientation, we want to find the step that fits closest to the rocker panel, but still has a little bit of a gap. So you can see if I try and push it all the way in, I make contact with that top step, so I want to pull it out just a little bit, and I have about this much of a gap between that top step. You're going to want to try and do the same thing with the rear step chalk. And so here you can see, since the elevation of the ground is different, I can fit the top step underneath, but on the other one it was the step below that. So if I try and match the 2 steps, when I go to let the air out of the tires, sometimes one step chalk will be loaded and the other step chalk will be not. So that's why it's kind of hard to use the step chalks in this configuration. That's why a lot of times I like to invert them. It just makes it easier.
So is it possible, I guess, that like with that front step chock, for example, if there's not, depending on the profile of the tire, right, how much air is or is not in that tire, you may not actually capture that step, right? Is that what you're saying, depending on how much?
Yeah, correct. So after we would let the air out of the tires, I'd probably be able to come and actually pull the step chalk out, and there would be no load transfer to the ground. Yep.
So if I get here on the engine company and I'm throwing these step chocks down for you and trying to get the vehicle prepped as much as possible, and you're coming on the rescue squad, you know, whether it's a door pop or anything more complicated, but the vehicle's on all 4s, can I do any harm by putting, like, is there a way that I can cause an issue and actually make your life more difficult by putting them in a the inappropriate place or the incorrect configuration, or like what would make your life more difficult potentially that should we really try to avoid?
Like we alluded to inside, keeping the step chalks as close to the front tire and the rear tire is the best possible area.
So if I were to drop one down right in here in the middle of the rocker panel or something like that, potentially that can cause you more of an issue, especially if I've already deflated the car, the tires, right, and landed them on there.
This could cause some issues if, after you deflated the car, the step chalk could possibly be getting in the way of opening the door if the car was lowered to the ground. If you were to place it like right here, potentially when you open the door, they could catch the top step. So that's why we just try and keep them as close to the rear wheel and the front wheel.
So as far as on all 4s, there's not a whole lot of harm we're going to do, but as long as we adhere to those principles, it should make your life easier in theory.
And again, something is always better than nothing. So if I'm on an extrication unit, it's very easy for me to come and change something if I have to. But
cool. All right.
And then I just want to show you one more thing on the car on all 4s here regarding airbags and vehicle systems. So a lot of times we see police officers are the biggest culprits of this, but you know, you'll have the door open or off and we're just reaching in, trying to put the vehicle in park, trying to take the keys out, and our head is right in front of the airbag. there's already been documented cases of the airbags going off after a collision and ending people's careers. So what I like to try and do is if I need to put the vehicle in park, put the parking brake on, or take the keys out of the ignition, I like to get down on one knee and I'll just stay away from the airbag, and I can reach underneath right here. I can have access to the parking brake, and I can even push the parking brake down right here. So just make sure your head is away from the area where the airbags might go off.
Sage advice. I'm sure I've done the same thing myself plenty of times without even thinking about it.
So have I. All right, let's move on to the vehicle on its side. Of all the scenarios we're going to go over today, this is the most unstable scenario that you will come across. There's really nothing you can do on the back side of the vehicle, since that's the flat part, the undercarriage. There's really no voids. What you want to look to do here is just prevent the vehicle from falling back over. So we have a couple void spaces we want to look at. That's right here where the A post meets the roof rail, and in the rear here where the C post meets the roof rail. So with step chalks, if you take them, a lot of times you can slide them under on an angle, and we can capture that A post where the roof rail meets. Same thing on the rear here. Again, if we invert the step chalk and slide it underneath, we can capture that C post where it meets the roof rail, widen the footprint of the vehicle, and make it more stable. And as far as placement goes for the extrication unit, typically they're going to do a roof removal, so they'll need access to cut the posts about right here and right here. So if there's any way to place your step chalks in a configuration that leaves this area open on both sides, that'll be good for the extrication unit.
Is this something if somebody's just confined, and I think I know the answer, but I know the answer, just to reiterate to everybody else, right? If this is a situation where they got a vehicle on its side, even if it's somebody who's just confined in the vehicle, they don't necessarily need to do a full roof removal or anything. They're basically just standing there waiting for somebody to help them get out. This is absolutely something you continue the extrication piece for, correct?
Yes.
For struts in a
Yes.
legitimate tieback. This is not a substitute for that, just initial until they get there, set their struts, tie it back, and actually, even if they're just confined, they just got to take the windshield out. Not placing everybody in service just because you throw a couple step chalks down, correct? Okay.
This is just to temporarily mitigate the incident, make it safer until the extrication unit arrives.
Awesome.
Onto the vehicle on its roof. Typically these configurations, the vehicle is pretty stable because the weight of the engine compartment has found its equilibrium. So a lot of times you're not going to need to do much with these, but what we can do is we can focus on the two void spaces here. We have where the C post meets the roof rail, and again at the A post. So in this configuration, we'll invert the step chalk. We can slide it underneath here, make contact with the roof rail and the ground. And then on the front, slide the step chalk right underneath here. As far as the extrication unit's concerned and a roof removal on this, most likely the rear step chalk will be in the way, but they have ways they can support the rear of the car via the trunk to remove that step chalk once they get on scene.
Cool. And do you know, I know I don't know, do you know as far as like an EV, a traditional front engine gas vehicle, obviously we know, end up in this configuration, how does an EV react to that, where the battery pack is more evenly distributed? Like, would it teeter more? I haven't personally seen one, so I don't know in terms of one on its roof.
I haven't either,
Yeah.
but I know Tesla's, the battery pack is the entire underside of the car. It's a tray. And then like your older generation hybrids, like the Priuses and things, the batteries are usually in the back. So you might see the opposite.
It'd be more of a counterbalance, if
Yeah.
anything, or if anything the other way. Cool. Yeah, so
then-
something to keep in mind, I guess, going forward.
And if the front was off the ground, you could just put some step chalks underneath the front as well.
The principle is just cribbing the voids no matter where they, this is
Basically.
just traditionally where they end up, but
Yep.
yeah. Cool. All right.
All right, so this scenario, we have an underride or a married pair, a vehicle on top of a vehicle. So first things first, the biggest concern for me would be the vehicle on the top rolling forward. So obviously we can set the parking brake, make sure the vehicle's in park, but here's where the wheel chocks come in handy as far as wheel chocks on transport units or the fire trucks. So if you simply take a wheel chalk and place them underneath both front tires, you can prevent the vehicle from rolling off. As far as the vehicle in the rear here, we're going to stabilize it like our traditional vehicle on all fours. Again, as close to the front tire as possible. And as close to the rear tire as possible. And then if you're concerned about trying to provide some type of support right here, one thing you can do is you can take two step chalks and you can marry them together at different heights if you need to fill a large gap, such as this. You could just slide it under there to provide some support. But when the extrication unit arrives, they'll typically utilize ratchet straps or chains, and they'll physically marry the two cars together to make them one. But this will provide you some initial stabilization.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's all good stuff, and I think it's especially for people at an engine-only firehouse, maybe it's a little bit harder to get your hands on. Or it's not something not a typical scenario you train on, right? Oh, hey, there's four of us on the engine company. We're rolling up. We had a wreck with one trap. What exactly are we going to do? Now, companies that work together and train together all the time, they generally just kind of fall in line, and because they have that rhythm of working together, even though they don't train that specific scenario. But to get some additional practice, I mean, obviously there's the resources here at the training academy that anybody could sign up to come and stabilize vehicles, whether it's with the cribbing here, you're just on an engine company, or get with one of your extrication resources around you. I know, my time as a firefighter at an engine-only firehouse, go over to the company with the extrication piece and say, hey, we want to do some basic stuff with you guys. Like, what do you want to see from us? When you pull up with the ladder truck, what are some things we can do? And we'd get our hands on the tools maybe a little bit, but it's mostly about, hey, what can we do and what helps you guys out, that kind of thing. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that, even if it's not at the training academy. Just talk to your closest extrication resource or two, whether it's a ladder truck or rescue squad or both, and just try to get together and do some of that training. So,
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, you got anything else out here, or transition back inside to wrap up? See if we got any questions.
Transition back inside.
All right, well, hopefully we don't lose it again. We'll transition back inside for the last few minutes. Thanks.
So I got a question, right? So, yep. So kind of a generic question, but right. So Jason, you ride or drive that rescue squad a lot. What would you say that we have to get better at? That maybe we've gotten a little off track on stabilization. I granted, we're not throwing anybody under the bus, but we all can improve everything, right? Me as an incident commander or whatever, right? But so as the driver of that thing, you show up on incidents, and if there was some say, hey, look, I think we just need to clean this up a little bit, what would that be regarding stabilization?
The basics, just making sure the vehicle's in park, the engine is turned off, and the parking brake is applied. And then also, again, with the airbags, keeping your head out of the zones where the steering wheel is and the front dashboard when those airbags goes off would be the things I think we need to clean up a little bit.
So I had a question related to 12-volt power, just regular battery power in the vehicles. Best practice still cut a chunk out of the negative cable. What's your take on controlling 12-volt power the most efficient, effective way?
If you can get to it and accomplish the task, that's great. If you can't, don't worry about it. But disconnect both battery cables if possible. And if you can only do one, make it the negative.
Okay.
Yes. And then make sure you either cut it or tuck it away so it can't make contact with the post. Yeah.
Good. Anything else you want to wrap up with? I mean, I think we pretty much covered the basics as far as vehicle prep and vehicle stabilization. I mean, I'd say the one just PSA I have along with this stuff, rescue stuff has never been my big forte. I think it's cool. I like learning about it. I've just never been permanently assigned to a place until now with an extrication resource as a firefighter and a float lieutenant before this. So going out to places as a newer, detailed firefighter or even as a float officer, like don't be afraid to ask the guys or girls driving the extrication piece or whatever. I know when I'd go into 15, if Jason was working, I'd always, ask just to pull something out. Like, it's something I'm not comfortable with, I haven't seen before, I just don't get my hands on often. I know a lot of people, that's, one of the big things, you get uncomfortable with something, you kind of get out of practice and you tend to shy away from it. I just encourage everybody to get involved as much as possible. Even if you're detailed in as a firefighter somewhere, right, riding the ambulance for the day, and somebody's doing rescue squad, driver check-off training or whatever, like, ask to get involved, right? Obviously, people are doing what they're doing, but just don't be afraid to jump in and learn something new, I would say. It's something I think was very valuable for me as I went around talking to different people at different firehouses with different extrication pieces. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. If nobody's got any other questions, I don't think in the chat, we're gonna wrap up. So, a couple upcoming episodes. We're gonna have an episode with some of the folks from Fromm's coming in. That's gonna be on April the 10th, I believe. It'll be kind of go over some different things in terms of the occupational wellness and all that stuff. That's on the 10th. We're gonna try to get that rescue engine episode aired, so probably sometime the end of April. Hopefully, we'll get a solid date out there shortly. But kind of continuing with the rescue theme, go over both the rescue engines. And that's about it. So hang out, everybody, if you could, at the end of this episode for 6 or 7 minutes. They've put together a compilation, I guess, of some vintage MCFRS video for you guys that'll play at the end of this episode. So just hang out. Should be some pretty cool video for you guys to watch. And until next time, thanks for joining us on Challenges in the Streets.